The moment the glass door slid open, the shouting hit her like a slap. A man's voice, sharp, cracking with outrage, echoed through the marble lobby of the Denver Heritage Foundation. She stole it. I'm telling you, she stole the ledger. People turned, startled, confused, and the accusation hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Jordan Walker stepped into the light, her breath catching as every pair of eyes shifted toward her, a quiet storm forming behind their stares. She didn't flinch, but the room did. It seemed to recoil around her, shrinking beneath the cold fluorescent lights. The scent of lemon polish, old wood, and the faint sweetness of stale coffee filled her lungs. In the center of the crowd, the man responsible for the outburst, Samuel Holt, a volunteer in his late 50s, was trembling from a cocktail of indignation and fear. His face, flushed with broken capillaries, twisted when he saw Jordan. There he spat. Ask her. She was the last one near it. Jordan's eyes narrowed slow and steady, like a lens tightening focus. Her voice, low and warm, curled through the room with a controlled calm that made several people step back. Last one near what, Mr. Holt? He hesitated, swallowing hard. His fingers shook as he held up an old binder, except it wasn't the binder. It was a cheap, generic replacement. The real one, the Foundation's century-old donation ledger, the document that held the names of families who'd built this city from the ground up, was missing. And now the room was hungry for someone to blame. She could feel the shift, a subtle tightening in the air, a judge and jury silence. Jordan surveyed the crowd, older donors in tailored blazers, the kind who'd spent decades believing they could read character like a weathered map. Volunteers in pastel cardigans looked at her with polite suspicion. Younger staff hovered at the edges, frightened by the tension, but drawn in like moths to a flame. Jordan set her tote bag down. One soft, deliberate sound. You're saying I stole it? Samuel jutted his chin. You walked past the archive room. Minutes before, we noticed it was gone. A murmur rippled through the lobby. Not disbelief temptation. An easy answer. A neat culprit. A woman stepped forward from the shadows of the reception desk. Linda Pruitt, mid-60s foundation, board member posture, straight as a hymn. The kind of woman whose eyes carried the weight of both faith and judgment. Mr. Holt, she said gently, accusing someone without proof will get us nowhere. But her eyes had already flicked over Jordan, assessing, measuring, bracing just in case the accusation held merit. Jordan caught that glance. She'd seen versions of it her entire life. The quick mental sorting belong or not trustworthy, or not one of us or not. And today, in her simple navy sweater and worn leather boots, she leaned too far into the category people underestimated. Her jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. I'm happy to answer any questions. But before we jump to conclusions, I'd like to know who had access to that room in the last 24 hours. This time the crowd murmured for real, a shuffle of uneasy feet, eyes widening. Guilt or fear or secrets, hard to tell which. Linda folded her arms. The board has a key. Senior volunteers have a copy. And the archives coordinator, of course. Then, after a pause, and those who request special access. Jordan held her gaze. Did anyone request special access, a beat? Then another? Finally, from the back of the room, a young woman lifted her hand. Small, hesitant. Her brown hair fell messily around her shoulders, and a smear of ink streaked her wrist. I did, she said softly. Yesterday morning. The room snapped toward her like a collective whip. Jordan watched her closely. The girl couldn't have been more than 27. Nervous, thoughtful, the type who lived half her life in books. Her name tag read, Emily Carter, Archives Assistant. Emily swallowed hard, her voice rising in pitch. I requested access for a donor exhibit. I returned everything. I swear I did. Samuel scoffed, but Jordan caught the tremble in the girl's fingers. Not guilt fear. And fear was a weapon people used carelessly. Jordan stepped closer, her tone gentle but precise. Emily, did anyone else approach you about the ledger? Emily blinked, confused. Then her expression shifted, subtle but real, like a thought she was afraid to speak. There was someone. Last night, right before closing. Who? Jordan asked. Emily hesitated, glancing nervously toward the corner of the lobby. A man stood there alone, tall, early 40s, salt and pepper beard, dark coat slung over one shoulder. His eyes were cold, observant. Too still. He didn't step forward. Didn't even flinch when Emily pointed in his direction with a trembling hand. Him. A slight stir ran through the crowd, but the man remained motionless, his expression unreadable. Jordan's heart slowed, tightened. A small muscle ticked at the corner of her jaw. She knew that face, knew it better than she wanted to admit. Not personally, professionally. He'd been sitting in boardrooms where decisions were made behind closed doors. Days ago, she'd seen his name attached to a legal brief involving a hostile acquisition attempt of a regional transportation firm, a brief her own company had quietly intercepted, a brief that hinted at someone pulling strings in Denver's philanthropic scene. Jordan felt the pieces begin to move on their own. The missing ledger, a stranger with too much interest in the archives, and now a public accusation perfectly timed to undermine her credibility the moment she stepped into the building. The man finally spoke. His voice was smooth, almost bored. I don't know what she's talking about. Emily stiffened. You asked for the donor records. You said you were researching a family trust. Her voice cracked. You signed the access sheet. Something flickered across his face for a split second. Annoyance, maybe. Then it vanished. Anyone could have signed that. It proves nothing. Jordan took one step forward, placing herself between Emily and the man without breaking eye contact. The lobby lights reflected off the polished floor, casting his shadow long and thin behind him. She felt Samuel shift behind her, his breath unsteady with guilt and uncertainty, now that his accusation was losing ground. Jordan spoke softly, but the words cut through the room like a clean blade. Tell me why you were in the archives after hours. He didn't answer. Instead, he smiled, a slow, knowing smile that settled into Jordan's bones like ice. Linda's voice broke the silence. Sir, may I have your name? The man reached into his coat, pulled out a pristine business card and handed it to her. Something in the way his fingers lingered made Jordan's skin crawl. Linda read it aloud. Thomas Blake, advisor to the Heritage Renewal Committee. A ripple of confusion shot through the room. The Heritage Renewal Committee had been dormant for years, a ghost of an initiative that never fully materialized. Most people believed it had dissolved. Jordan knew better. If Blake had ties to it, someone was resurrecting old power in new shadows. He leaned back slightly, his voice quiet but edged. I don't appreciate being accused. Perhaps some people are simply looking to deflect blame. The crowd shifted again, torn between doubt, indignation, and a simmering fear of being wrong. Jordan drew a long breath, feeling the weight of every gaze. Her pulse steadied. Her voice dropped into something calm, controlled, and unshakably certain. The ledger didn't disappear on its own, she said. And if someone took it, they didn't take it to steal history. They took it to bury something. Blake's eyes twitched barely but enough. Jordan saw it. Linda saw it. Emily saw it. And the room froze, because the air had changed. The tension wasn't about a missing book anymore. It was about what that book proved, and who was afraid of it. Jordan stepped forward, closing the gap between her and Blake by inches. "I'm not here to deflect blame," she said. "I'm here because someone wanted me to walk into this building and stand exactly where I'm standing now." Blake exhaled through his nose, almost amused. "You think too highly of yourself?" Jordan's gaze sharpened. "No, I think someone else does, and they're terrified I'll figure out why." The lobby held its breath. Outside, the wind pushed against the glass doors with a hollow thud, as if urging the room to break open. Jordan didn't move. Blake didn't blink, and the ledger somewhere in the city pulsed like a buried heartbeat, waiting to expose the truth someone was willing to risk everything to hide. Jordan lowered her voice to a near whisper, the words sinking deep into every ear present. "This isn't about me. It's about what someone needs erased," and somewhere behind Blake's calm facade, something cracked, just enough for Jordan to see the truth. This was no coincidence. It was the beginning. A gust of cold air swept in as the side doors opened, rattling the framed portraits on the lobby walls, and for a moment the entire building seemed to inhale. Jordan felt the shift subtle, but sharp, like the moment before a storm breaks. Blake didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, with the quiet arrogance of a man convinced nothing and no one could touch him. But something flickered in his eyes just once when a uniformed security officer hurried down the hallway toward them. Officer Helen Graves, late 50s, sturdy frame, eyes that missed nothing. She pushed through the cluster of donors with a slow, practiced authority. "All right," she said, her voice flat as gravel. "What's going on here?" The crowd broke open around her. Samuel pointed at Jordan again, but the gesture faltered halfway, like even he wasn't sure anymore. Emily stepped back until her shoulders were pressed against the reception desk hands, gripping the edge like she needed something to anchor her. And Linda stood with her arms crossed, her expression heavy concern, calculation lingering doubt. Officer Graves scanned each face before settling on Jordan. "You the one folks keep whispering about?" Jordan tilted her head slightly. "Depends what they're whispering." Blake's smile sharpened. "Officer, someone misplaced an item of significant historical value. Apparently accusations are easier than accountability today." The officer turned toward him unimpressed. "I didn't ask you." A low chuckle ran through the donors, nervous and thin. Jordan took a breath. "The Foundation's ledger is missing. Mr. Holt believed I took it. Miss Carter stated that Mr. Blake was the last person who requested access." Graves turned. "That true?" Her stare pinned Blake in place. Emily's voice cracked as she answered before he could speak. I saw him. I logged him in." Blake sighed long and theatrical, like someone tired of humoring fools. "Officer, I advise multiple historical organizations. I look at documents every day. If the girl misremembered, I didn't misremember," Emily whispered, face blanching with fear and anger all tangled together. Jordan watched her saw the fight inside the young woman, quiet, trembling but present. "Emily," Jordan said gently, "tell her exactly what happened." Emily swallowed. "He came in right before we closed. Said he needed to confirm donor affiliations for an archival project. He asked specifically about the ledger." Officer Graves shifted her weight. "Mr. Blake, you want to explain why you didn't mention any of that?" Blake's jaw tightened. "I didn't mention it because I assumed this institution had better safeguards than relying on the memory of a junior assistant. The words hit Emily hard. Jordan saw the way her shoulders folded, the way her hand slipped from the desk and curled into fists she didn't lift. Jordan met Blake's gaze, her voice low. People always reveal themselves when they're defensive. He stepped toward her. Too close. His breath smelled faintly of mint and something metallic. Careful. You're speaking as though you have authority here. Jordan didn't step back. I speak as someone who can see through you. The lobby temperature seemed to drop. Graves moved slightly between them. Enough. All of you. Let me do my job. She took out a small notebook. I'm going to need statements from everyone involved. No one leaves this building without clearance. A ripple of tension swept the room. Linda finally spoke, her voice thin but steady. That seems extreme. No Graves replied. Extreme is accusing someone in public without evidence. We're past that now. We're in investigation territory. Jordan saw the way Linda's fingers twisted around the edge of her bracelet. A tell. Worry, but also something deeper. Worry about appearances. About donors. About fallout. Blake folded his arms. I'm happy to cooperate. His tone said the opposite. Graves scribbled notes, then glanced over her glasses. Mr. Blake, I'll talk to you first. Something in his posture changed, very slight, but it was there. A hesitation. A recalibration. She guided him toward the side office, her hand on his elbow. Not gently. The crowd watched them disappear behind the frosted glass door. When it shut, the room exhaled all at once like a spell had broken. Samuel cleared his throat. Well, maybe he did have something to do with it. Linda shot him a look. Now you reconsider. He stiffened. I never said she did it. I said she was near the room. Anyone could have. Samuel. Linda snapped, a rare sharpness breaking through her composed veneer. Stop digging. He closed his mouth. Jordan watched them in silence, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her shoulders. The missing ledger wasn't just paper. It held records of land gifts, family loans, and political favors stretching back more than a century. If someone wanted to erase a name or a debt, this ledger would be worth more than gold. Emily moved to Jordan's side, her voice small. I didn't mean to point fingers. It felt wrong. The way he looked at the ledger, like he wasn't studying history, like he was hunting something inside it. Jordan kept her gaze on the office door. You trusted your instinct. That's more than most people do. Emily's lips trembled into the faintest smile before flattening again, the weight of the situation crashing back onto her shoulders. A soft chime rang from the hallway. Someone new entered the lobby, a tall man with graying hair, a weathered leather jacket, and the weary confidence of someone who'd spent decades walking into places where he wasn't welcome but belonged anyway. His eyes were sharp as river rock and just as unreadable. Linda straightened. Howard, you're early. Jordan twisted toward him. Howard Pruitt, husband of Linda, former city councilman, a man known for keeping secrets so neatly folded even truth couldn't find its way out. Howard nodded to the room, nodding once at Linda, then let his gaze rest briefly but noticeably on Jordan. Something like recognition flickered there, though Jordan couldn't place it. Linda called me, Howard said. Said there was trouble. Trouble. The word lingered heavy. Jordan watched him step forward, watched how the crowd made space for him with unconscious deference. Power had a shape in a room, and he wore it like a second skin. He picked up the cheap replacement binder from Samuel's hands, turning it over, inspecting the spine. Ledger goes missing, he murmured, mostly to himself. right when the Foundation is renegotiating its land use agreements with the city. Funny timing. Linda's head snapped toward him. Howard. Jordan caught that too. Warning disguised as a reprimand. He kept speaking. You think this is a coincidence? Samuel looked uncomfortable. You saying someone stole it on purpose? Howard's eyes drifted to the office where Blake was being questioned. I'm saying people do strange things when history threatens their future. The words slid into the room like a draft from an open door. Jordan watched him with a tightening in her chest. His tone, his timing, none of this felt spontaneous. He wasn't investigating. He was steering. Emily tugged gently on Jordan's sleeve. Do you know him? No, Jordan wanted to say. But that wasn't entirely true. She didn't know him personally, but she knew men like him. Men who built alliances in back rooms, traded favors behind closed curtains, orchestrated outcomes so quietly that no one noticed until their world had already been rearranged. And if Howard Pruitt was here, uninvited before the police even filed a report, then he wasn't reacting to the missing ledger. He was afraid of what it would reveal, or worse, he needed to control who found it. The office door clicked open. Officer Graves stepped out, her expression carved from stone. Blake followed, smile gone, shoulders rigid. She scanned the room. Miss Walker, she said. You're next. Jordan felt every heartbeat like a drum under her ribs. She gathered her bag and walked toward the office, passing Blake at the doorway. He didn't step aside. He leaned in, voice soft enough for only her to hear. You're walking into the wrong fight. Jordan met his stare. Then why do you look worried? His tongue pressed against his cheek, a flash of irritation. Then he stepped back, letting her pass. Jordan entered the small office. Graves shut the door behind her. The noise of the lobby faded into a distant hum. The officer gestured to a chair. Jordan sat. Miss Walker Graves said, taking her seat across from her. Before we begin, I need to ask you something very simple. Jordan held her gaze. Go ahead. Why, Graves said slowly, would someone want to frame you? Jordan breathed out, long and steady. Because I wasn't supposed to be here today. Graves blinked, meaning Jordan leaned forward. Someone needed a distraction. They needed eyes on me instead of where they should be. And where is that? Jordan's voice sharpened, on whoever is terrified that ledger might be found. A shadow crossed Graves's face, a subtle understanding beginning to form. Jordan continued. This isn't a theft, it's a cover. Cover for what Graves asked. Jordan looked toward the frosted glass door where Blake's silhouette lingered in the lobby. For something someone buried a long time ago, she said. And something they're afraid I'll uncover. Graves tapped her pen lightly, her eyes narrowing. Outside, Blake's shadow shifted. And Jordan knew he was listening. Officer Graves closed her notebook, the soft snap echoing louder than it should have in the cramped office. Outside the frosted glass, the lobby murmured with restless bodies and muffled speculation. Inside, the air was still thick with unasked questions and the faint hum of the building's old ventilation system. Graves leaned back, studying Jordan, the way someone examines a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit the border yet. You're telling me, she said slowly, that someone orchestrated this whole mess just to keep attention off themselves. Jordan held her gaze without blinking. I'm telling you, someone needed a distraction, and they needed it fast. Graves tapped her pen against the table. Once. Twice. You expect me to believe this is some kind of setup targeting you specifically. You're a visitor. A donor, sure, but not someone with sway inside this foundation. Jordan's expression didn't change. That's exactly why I'm useful. No one questions a stranger being blamed. The officer opened her mouth to reply, but the intercom crackled overhead. A shaky voice, probably the intern who manned the front desk on weekends, spilled into the room. Officer Graves, the city liaison, just arrived. He says it's urgent. Graves frowned. City liaison. We didn't call the city. Jordan felt her stomach tighten. Who is it? The intercom clicked again. Councilman Howard Pruitt. Graves muttered something under her breath and stood. Stay here. But Jordan rose too. No. If he's here because of the ledger, he'll say just enough to steer your investigation before you realize he's doing it. Graves faced her fully, now eyes narrowing with a mix of annoyance and curiosity. You seem awfully confident about the motives of people you claim you don't know. Jordan's voice sharpened. I don't need to know them. I know their patterns. The officer stared at her for a long moment. Then she exhaled. Fine. But you stay out of the way and let me handle the talking. Jordan nodded. Graves opened the door. The hum of voices swelled instantly, and the moment the crowd saw her, the room stiffened. Howard Pruitt stood in the center of it all, a quiet, gravitational force, pulling every anxious gaze his way. His silver hair was neatly combed, his expression carved from careful neutrality. But his eyes, those restless, calculating eyes, held too many storms for such calm. Linda stayed close to him, her hand hovering near his sleeve, as if she needed the reassurance of touching power. Blake stood several feet away, arms folded, watching the scene with a tight-lipped smirk that made Jordan's skin crawl. Samuel hovered near the coffee table, fidgeting with a stack of brochures he kept rearranging, but never actually fixed. Graves moved first. Councilman Pruitt, this is an active investigation. What brings you here so quickly? Howard offered a courteous nod, the kind that looked respectful, but felt rehearsed. The ledger isn't just a relic, officer. It contains land agreements tied to city zoning decisions. Its disappearance could complicate several upcoming reviews. Naturally, I came to assist. Jordan stepped forward before Graves could speak. Assist, she repeated. Is that what we're calling it? Howard turned toward her, a flicker of irritation crossing his face like a shadow slipping across the sun. Miss Walker, I wasn't aware you were part of this matter. She isn't. Graves said firm. She's providing a statement. Howard smiled slightly. Of course. But Jordan didn't look away. You got here fast, almost like you knew the ledger was missing before the police were even called. Linda inhaled sharply. Jordan, that's inappropriate. Jordan ignored her. She kept her eyes locked on Howard. You know what I do for a living. You know exactly why I see the cracks in your story. Howard's jaw tensed. Barely. Miss Walker, I've served this city for over 30 years. My concern is the stability of our institutions. That ledger isn't about stability, Jordan said softly. It's about leverage. Blake stepped forward, then his voice slicing into the tension. Officer, are you going to allow this kind of baseless speculation? It's wasting valuable time. Jordan didn't turn to him. You speak like someone who's afraid of what the ledger might reveal. Blake gave a small laugh, cold and controlled. You've built quite the imagination. Graves raised a hand. Enough. All three of you. The room simmered into a tense quiet, but the air felt sharpened now like the moment before lightning decides its path. Graves addressed Howard again. Unless you have evidence or a formal report, you need to step aside. Howard's polite veneer thinned. "Officer Graves, surely you understand the urgency. The ledger contains information predating half the neighborhoods in this city. If it falls into the wrong hands like whose Jordan asked." His glare snapped to her. "This is not your domain." Jordan took one slow step forward. "It became my domain the moment someone tried to frame me." Linda grabbed Howard's arm, whispering something under her breath. He didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on Jordan with a controlled, simmering contempt. Then Graves's radio crackled. "Officer Graves, this is storage security. We found something you need to see." The officer brought the radio closer. "What is it?" "A security box, hidden behind the lower shelves, locked, might be connected to the missing item." The room froze, not in relief, but in dread. Graves straightened. "I'll go down. No one leaves this building until I'm back." She moved through the crowd with determined strides, but Jordan followed her. "Miss Walker, stay here," the officer warned. "I'm coming," Jordan said. "If someone planted something to frame me, it'll be in that box." Graves hesitated. She weighed authority against practicality and found herself folding under the weight of possibility. "Fine, but stay behind me." But they moved quickly down the hallway, their footsteps echoing against concrete walls painted in peeling cream. At the bottom of the stairwell, a storage supervisor waited, thin, anxious, ringing his keys like prayer beads. He led them to a dim back room where rows of metal shelving created shadowed aisles and the fluorescent lights flickered like aging stars. "This way," he whispered. They stopped before a shelf filled with cardboard archives. Behind a row of boxes, partially concealed, sat a small metal lockbox. Dust gathered along its edges, but the scrape marks on the floor beneath it were fresh. Graves crouched. "Help me move the boxes." Jordan pushed aside the top row, while Graves tugged the box forward. It wasn't heavy. That worried Jordan more than if it had been. A ledger as thick as the one missing wouldn't fit easily into such a small space. So what was inside? The supervisor stepped back, uneasy. "I didn't open it. Found it like that." Graves inspected the lock. Standard padlock, could have been placed here any time. Jordan spoke softly. "Not any time. Recently. The dust pattern gives it away." Graves gave her a look that was half annoyance, half reluctant respect. "Let's see what's inside." She pulled out her multi-tool, worked the lock carefully, and after a tense moment, it snapped open. She lifted the lid. Jordan leaned forward, and the breath punched out of both of them. Inside were pages, old-yellowed, torn from something larger, and on each one were names. Dozens of them, handwritten in fading ink. Not the entire ledger, but entries from it. The missing sections. Graves's voice dropped to a whisper. Someone removed these deliberately. Jordan's pulse thudded in her ears. They needed the ledger to look stolen, but the real target was these pages. The officer looked up at her. Why these names? Jordan stared at the brittle papers in shock and dawning recognition, because she knew one of the names. Knew it too well. It belonged to a man who had built half the developments on the west side of the city. A man whose descendants still sat on committees that shaped zoning laws and grant approvals. A man connected to Howard Pruitt. Graves shut the box gently. This isn't just about theft. It's about history someone once erased. Jordan nodded, or rewritten. A chill spread through the room like a whispered promise. Because this wasn't about the ledger anymore. It was about a secret buried for generations. And someone had just handed Jordan the first shovel. The moment Officer Graves closed the lid on the lockbox, The faint hum of the storage room felt louder, almost like the walls themselves were listening. Jordan stared at the torn ledger pages spread across the table, their brittle edges curling like the skin of something long dead, but not yet at rest. The ink, though faded, carried weight. Names, dates, and a series of land transfers that did not match the official archives she had reviewed a week earlier. It was the mismatch that twisted her gut. Someone had altered the city's recorded past. Graves exhaled slowly, bracing her hands on the metal table. "All right," she murmured. "Let's start simple. Why would someone rip these pages out and leave the rest?" Her forehead creased, deepening the lines of a life spent sorting lies from truth. Jordan leaned down, tracing one entry with her eyes. A transfer from a family named Dunwell to the city's Land Renewal Bureau dated nearly 70 years ago. Except Jordan remembered that name from a series of investment maps she'd studied. According to public records, the Dunwell family hadn't owned that land at all during that period. "Because these pages don't match the story the city tells now," she said quietly. "Someone rewrote history a long time ago, and these are the fragments that can expose it." Graves gave her a side glance. "You talk like you've been digging into this before today." Jordan didn't answer right away. She sifted through memories, through the numbers and discrepancies she had been noticing for months in her logistics work around the city's redevelopment zones. "I've seen hints," she finally said. "Patterns that didn't make sense. Land that changed hands too fast. Deals that skipped zoning review altogether. It felt like an invisible hand guiding everything. And you think this ledger is that hand?" Jordan looked up, eyes steady. "I think this ledger is the hand's signature." Before Graves could respond, the radio clipped to her shoulder, crackled to life, the voice tense. "Officer Graves, the councilman is requesting to speak with you again. He says it's urgent." Graves groaned. "Of course he does." She turned toward the door, but Jordan's hand shot out, lightly stopping her. "He knows we're down here," Jordan said. "He's trying to get ahead of whatever we're about to discover." Graves lifted a brow. "You think Pruitt is involved?" Jordan didn't hesitate. "I think he's terrified." The officer clicked off her radio. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me if anyone tries to come in. Don't touch anything else." Jordan watched her leave the door swinging shut with a hollow thunk. The supervisor who had led them into the room lingered uncertainly in the corner before retreating up the stairs, leaving Jordan alone. Silence wrapped the room. She turned back to the pages, spreading them into a loose grid. Her fingers hovered above the ink-tracing lineage power, the silent architecture of corruption. A ledger wasn't simply a record. It was proof. Proof of lineage, of ownership of decisions that shaped neighborhoods and dictated who belonged and who didn't. Jordan picked up a name on one sheet. Harold Whitford, a developer with ties to the Pruitt family through marriage. A man whose land deals were the backbone of the city's West Side transformation, deals that had displaced hundreds of families under the guise of renewal. Jordan felt her breath deepen, steady slow. This wasn't just about land. This was about legacy control, manipulation spanning generations. A faint creak echoed in the hallway. Jordan tensed. The sound was barely audible, but it wasn't random. Footsteps, measured, deliberate, moving toward the storage room. She stepped silently toward the table and slid the lockbox back into place, covering it partially with an old binder. Her pulse sharpened, but her movements stayed calm, controlled. A shadow passed under the door. Then A voice slipped through the crack, low and male. "Miss Walker." Jordan's spine stiffened. "Blake!" He rattled the doorknob. "Would you mind opening this? Officer Graves told me you were down here, and I'd like to clear the air between us." Jordan said nothing. The handle twisted again. Firmer this time. "I know you're in there," Blake said smoothly. "Let's not make this awkward." Jordan stepped back, positioning herself behind a shelf. Her breath slowed, her palms flattened against the cold metal frame. She waited. The rattling stopped. A soft sigh drifted through the door, almost theatrical. "Miss Walker, I'm only trying to help the investigation. I think you'll find we actually want the same thing." Jordan closed her eyes briefly. His voice was too calm, too confident. A man in control of his own fear, or a man who didn't feel any. The footsteps receded, slowly, heel to toe, a practiced retreat. Jordan waited a full 30 seconds after the last sound. Then she exhaled, shoulders easing just a fraction. Footsteps again. Not Blake's. Faster. Lighter. Nervous. The door clicked once, then again. A voice whispered urgently. "Jordan, are you in there?" "It's me, Emily." Jordan moved to the door and cracked it open. Emily slipped inside, immediately, shutting it behind her chest, rising and falling in shallow breaths. Her eyes were red, either from fear or holding back tears. Maybe both. "He's talking to Howard," Emily whispered. "They sent everyone back into the lobby, but I saw them step into one of the conference rooms. And I think they're arguing." Jordan studied her. "What did you hear?" Emily squeezed her hands together. "Howard told him this wasn't the plan. Blake said you were ruining the timing. And then Howard said something about the board vote next month," and her voice cracked. "I shouldn't have listened, but I got scared." Jordan softened. "You did the right thing." Emily shook her head. "I don't know what any of it means. But whatever they're doing, they didn't expect you to get involved." Jordan felt the weight of it land inside her, sharp and precise. She had stepped into a theatre mid-play, and the actors were now scrambling to rewrite the script. Emily's gaze drifted to the table. "Is that really part of the ledger?" Jordan nodded. Emily's throat bobbed. "What happens now?" Jordan opened the lockbox, fully letting Emily see the names, the evidence, the truth laid bare, like bones. Now Jordan said softly, "We find out who this threatens most." A voice thundered down the hall. "Miss Walker." Both women jerked at once. Officer Graves threw the door open, breath quick, jaw tight. "We have a problem." Jordan straightened. "What happened?" Graves pointed up the stairs. "The Pruitts are leaving. Both of them. They're claiming a family emergency." Emily gasped. "They can't leave. They're part of this. They're trying to." Graves snapped. "I stalled them, but I can't detain them without cause. And I sure as hell don't have probable cause to arrest a councilman." Jordan's eyes moved to the torn pages again. Names, transfers, shadows of old decisions that had shaped an entire city. If the ledger connected to zoning, corruption, political fraud, land theft, it was bigger than a missing book. Bigger than a simple setup. "You have cause," Jordan said quietly. "You just haven't seen it yet." Graves planted her hands on her hips. "Then show me." "Fast!" Before Jordan could move, a distant sound cut through the hallway. A door slamming. Hard. Graves swore. "They're making a run for it." Emily looked at Jordan, terrified. "What do we do?" Jordan didn't hesitate. She grabbed the lockbox. She stepped past both women, and with her voice calm as winter steel, she said, "We stop them before they bury the past again." The three of them sprinted up the stairs toward the lobby, where the truth was already trying to escape. The doors to the lobby burst open. Just as Jordan reached the top of the stairs, the lockbox clutched against her side. The sound hit her first, chaotic rising, panicked voices bouncing off the marble floors. Then she saw them. Howard and Linda Pruitt were already near the exit, weaving through startled donors as if the walls themselves were collapsing behind them. Linda kept glancing over her shoulder, her composure splintering with every step. Howard moved differently, purposeful jaw, locked eyes, scanning for threats he couldn't yet see. Officer Graves pushed past Jordan. "Councilman, stop right there." Howard didn't slow. He reached for the door handle. Jordan cut across the lobby, moving fast enough that several older donors stepped back, as if confronted by a storm they couldn't name. "Howard!" she shouted. He froze. His hand hovered inches from the brass handle. The sunlight from outside glinted along his wedding band, catching the faint tremor in his fingers. Linda whispered, "Don't turn around." But he did. Slowly. His eyes locked on the metal lockbox Jordan carried. For the first time since the chaos began, something fractured behind his expression, fear sharp and unguarded. Graves reached them, breath tight. "You're both staying for questioning." Howard's voice was calm, too calm. "You don't have the authority to detain us." Linda stepped closer to her husband, gripping his arm. "Officer, you're overstepping. We have a genuine emergency, a family matter." Jordan stepped into their path. "Your emergency started the moment you realized what was in this box." Linda recoiled as though the box were radioactive. "We don't know anything about that." But her eyes betrayed her. They flicked to the lockbox again. Heat, guilt, dread woven into one terrified stare. Howard forced a smile. "Miss Walker, you might believe you've stumbled onto something meaningful, but you're mistaken. You don't understand how delicate certain historical documents can be." Misinterpretation, Jordan shut him down with a single sentence. "Your father's name is in the missing pages." Silence cracked open across the lobby. Howard inhaled sharply through his nose, the sound tight and involuntary. Linda's grip tightened on his arm until her knuckles blanched. The crowd, sensing the shift, drew closer in a slow, instinctive circle. Jordan didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Your father signed the land transfer that erased the Dunwell families from the West Side 70 years ago. Those pages connect directly to zoning approvals you've pushed through for decades." Blake emerged from the hallway, face pale. He knew. The moment he saw Howard's expression, the moment he saw the lockbox cradled against Jordan's hip, he knew. Graves stepped forward, her tone level but firm. "Councilman Pruitt, I'm going to ask you one last time to step away from the doors." Howard's voice turned cold. "Officer, this is a misunderstanding. That ledger has no legal bearing anymore. Whatever names Jordan thinks she's seen." Jordan pulled one of the torn pages from the box. She held it between two fingers. This page was removed because the original signatures would contradict the digital archive your office submitted 3 months ago in the redevelopment review. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Emily appeared at the edge of the lobby, breathless eyes wide with something between fury and awe. Jordan's voice sharpened until it felt like glass. Someone forged the digital records. Someone altered the city's land history. And someone needed the ledger gone before today's review. Howard took a step toward her. "You don't understand what you're implying." "I understand exactly," Jordan replied. "You're not running from a scandal. You're running from a felony." Linda let out a sound, thin, desperate. "Jordan, listen to me. You don't know the pressure he's been under. The political sharks, the city board Jordan, turned her gaze on her. And that gave him the right to bury families alive in paperwork." Emily moved beside Jordan, her voice trembling but resolute. "You can't leave. Not until the truth is out." Howard lifted his chin. Your children playing with matches. Jordan stepped closer, the ledger page held at her side. And you're standing in a room soaked in gasoline. For a moment, no one breathed. Then the doors behind the Pruitts opened again, not outward, but inward, and a man in a dark windbreaker stepped inside. A federal windbreaker. The patch read, Department of Justice Historical Records Integrity Division. The entire lobby fell silent. The man stepped forward with calm, measured authority. Councilman Howard Pruitt. Mrs. Linda. Pruitt, please step away from the doors. We've been notified of irregularities in the archival submissions tied to your office. Howard's face drained. Who called you? The agent didn't answer. His eyes drifted to Jordan. She didn't look away. Graves straightened. Agent, they've been attempting to leave during an active investigation. I request they remain in the building until your team has reviewed the evidence. The agent nodded once. Agreed. Howard's composure cracked. You have no idea what you're interfering with. Jordan lifted the torn page slightly. I think I finally do. The agent gestured to another officer standing just outside. Escort them to the conference room. Separate them. As they were led away, Linda's shoulders shook. Howard didn't look back. His face had gone hollow, carved with decades of decisions collapsing all at once. Once the doors closed behind the escorting officers, the lobby breathed again, uneven shaking, as if the building itself had been holding its lungs tight. Blake stepped backward, inching toward the hallway, sweat beading at his hairline. Jordan turned to him. Going somewhere, he froze. The agent pivoted toward him. And you are? Blake swallowed. Thomas Blake, advisor to the Heritage Renewal, the committee that dissolved 10 years ago. Jordan said quietly. Which means you're working for someone who doesn't want their name tied to this. Blake's lips parted, but no words came out. Graves exhaled. Jordan, hand me the box. Jordan held it out. The agent lifted the lid, scanned the pages, and closed it gently. Miss Walker, how did you know these existed? Jordan met his stare. Because corruption leaves fingerprints, and sooner or later, someone sees the smudge. He studied her for a long moment. You may need to provide a statement at the federal office. Jordan nodded. Just tell me when. Emily touched Jordan's arm, voice soft. You didn't have to do all that. You could have walked away. Jordan looked at her. Really looked. The fear, the bravery, the trembling outrage in her young face. If someone doesn't stand up, she said the same, people keep rewriting the story. And the rest of us are forced to live in the margins. Emily's eyes watered. She blinked hard, not wanting anyone to see. The donors stood still, processing what had just unfolded. Their world, comfortable curated, had been cracked open, and they didn't know yet whether to fear the light or embrace it. The agent nodded respectfully to Jordan. We'll be in touch. He turned away. Graves followed him. Emily squeezed Jordan's hand, and Jordan, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her bones, knew this wasn't the end. It was the threshold, because if these pages were missing, others might be too. And if Howard Pruitt wasn't working alone, then someone else, someone bigger, was pulling the strings. Jordan exhaled slowly. The real fight hadn't begun. Not yet. Jordan stepped out of the foundation building into the sharp bite of late autumn air, the kind that scraped across the skin and left a sting behind. The parking lot spread before her in long shadows, the sky dimming to a heavy blue, the sun sinking behind the jagged roof lines like a burner cooling after a long boil. She paused at the top of the steps, the lockbox tucked beneath her arm, and let the cold settle in. Calm her. Center her. But it didn't. Not tonight. Not with the ledger's torn history whispering from inside the metal case. Footsteps approached behind her. Emily. Her breath formed small clouds that drifted upward, little ghosts that vanished before they lived long enough to matter. "Are you sure you don't want someone walking you to your car?" she asked, hugging her sweater sleeves like armor. Jordan shook her head. "I'm fine." Emily's gaze softened with worry. "You know they're not going to let this go quietly, right? Howard Blake, whoever they're working with, I know exactly what they'll do," Jordan said. Her voice came out low, a quiet current beneath the still air. "They'll try to control the narrative. They'll try to discredit every page in this box. And if that doesn't work, they'll come after the people around it." Emily swallowed. "People like me." Jordan studied her face. Young, earnest, terrified, but holding herself together with a thread of resolve that made Jordan feel a fierce, unexpected respect. "Especially you," she said gently. "You saw what you weren't supposed to see." Emily's eyes darted across the nearly empty lot. "Then what do I do now?" Jordan didn't answer. Not because she didn't know, but because she needed Emily to understand the gravity. "Be careful," Jordan said finally. "Don't walk anywhere alone. Don't ignore phone calls that don't feel right. People like Howard, they're not dangerous because they act. They're dangerous because they plan." Before Emily could respond, a car door slammed across the lot. Jordan turned sharply. A dark sedan sat parked under the flickering streetlight. The lamp stuttered, buzzing like an old sign about to lose its will to stay lit. A figure leaned against the car's hood, arms crossed, shoulders relaxed, watching them. Blake. Jordan felt her pulse flick harder. Not fear. Something sharper. Emily stepped back. "Jordan? It's all right," Jordan murmured, though she wasn't sure it was. Blake pushed off the car and walked towards them, his shoes crunching over brittle leaves. He stopped several yards away, hands slipping casually into his coat pockets. Leaving without saying goodbye, his tone was cool, too calm for the moment. "After all we've shared today, I thought we had something special." Jordan stood still, perfectly still. "If you came to threaten me, get it over with." He smiled. "Threaten no. I'm here to reason." Emily stiffened. "You mean intimidate?" Blake's eyes flicked toward her. "I wasn't talking to you." Jordan stepped subtly forward, placing herself between Emily and Blake. "Then start talking." "What do you want?" Blake exhaled slowly, almost sympathetically, though the gesture rang hollow. "You don't understand the magnitude of what you're holding. Those pages you found. They don't tell the whole story. They tell a version. One that can hurt a lot of people who weren't even alive when those signatures were written." Jordan felt her jaw tighten. "You mean they can hurt the people benefiting from old crimes?" His smile faltered. "You're oversimplifying. These families, they've built institutions, jobs, neighborhoods. You can put a garden on stolen ground." Jordan cut in. "Doesn't make the soil clean." Blake stepped closer. "You're going to burn this city down, chasing ghosts." Jordan didn't flinch. Then maybe it needed burning. The streetlight flickered again, washing Blake's face in alternating bands of shadow and sickly yellow glow. Something cold settled behind his eyes, a click of calculation. "You're making this bigger than yourself, Walker. Bigger than what you can control." "Good," Jordan said. "It means I'm on the right track." Blake's gaze slid to the lockbox. "Give me the pages. I'll make sure the DOJ gets the right version of events. Things will be managed." Jordan lifted the box slightly, just enough for him to see, She wasn't hiding fear behind its weight. If I hand you this, it disappears. Just like the truth has disappeared every generation before me. His expression darkened. You think you're some kind of hero? No, Jordan said. But I'm not a coward. The wind rose crisp and sudden, carrying a swirl of dried leaves around their feet. Then a voice rang out behind them. Step away from her. Officer Graves. She strode across the parking lot, her silhouette hard against the fading sky, one hand resting near her holster. Not on it, just close enough to make the point. Blake stiffened, but didn't turn. I was just having a conversation, he said lightly. Then the conversation's over, Graves replied. You're to keep a minimum distance from Miss Walker until this investigation is processed. Blake let out a soft scoff. On whose order? Yours on mine, a deeper voice said. A second figure stepped into view behind Graves, the DOJ agent, the same one who had escorted the Pruitts inside earlier. Blake froze, not with fear, but with the sudden, desperate realization that his script was unraveling faster than he could repair it. The agent approached him with steady steps. Mr. Blake will need you to come downtown for additional questioning. Blake's composure splintered. On what grounds? We have records indicating your access to archival materials predates the Pruitts' involvement, the agent said. And a witness placing you near the ledger room after hours last week. Emily sucked in a breath. Jordan watched Blake's mask crack at the edges, revealing something leaner and meaner behind the practiced charm. You're making a mistake, he said, voice tightening. Jordan stepped forward, her words cutting through the dark. No. You made the mistake when you assumed people wouldn't question your version of history. Blake's jaw twitched. This city will tear itself apart if you go through with this. Jordan held his stare. Maybe it needs to so it can rebuild with the truth. The agent gestured toward the sedan. Mr. Blake. For a moment, Blake didn't move. Then, with a cold, bitter stillness, he turned and walked toward the car. Graves escorted him, her face unreadable, her posture rigid with purpose. Emily let out a trembling breath when he disappeared inside the vehicle. He scares me, she whispered. Jordan placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Good. It means you know what danger looks like. Emily's eyes shone under the parking lot lights. What happens now? Jordan looked down at the lockbox, then up at the dark sky. The weight of the truth felt heavier tonight than it had inside the building, heavier because the fight had pushed beyond walls and into the city itself. Now Jordan said softly, We see how deep this goes. A gust of wind blew again, colder this time, rattling the bare branches at the edge of the lot. The sound echoed like a warning or a promise. Emily shivered. You think they'll come after you? Jordan didn't answer right away. She watched the DOJ sedan pull away, watched Graves radio for backup, watched donors peer nervously from the foundation windows. They already have, she said finally. But they made one mistake. Emily blinked. What's that? Jordan lifted the lockbox, the metal catching the last sliver of daylight. They underestimated the cost of what they tried to erase. And as the night folded around them, Jordan Walker understood with crystalline clarity. The truth wasn't just buried. It was bleeding through the cracks, and whoever tried to stop her had just revealed themselves as the first of many shadows waiting to be dragged into the light. Snow began to fall the next morning, thin and hesitant, at first like the sky was testing whether the world deserved softness or warning. Jordan watched it drift across her windshield as she sat in the parking lot outside her office building, the lock box on the passenger seat beside her. The city felt muted under the grey blanket, but the quiet wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, expectant, as if every falling flake carried the weight of someone's buried secret. She hadn't slept. Not really. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Howard's face when he realized she had the ledger pages. She heard Blake's voice, twisting itself into threats, dressed as courtesy. She felt the room tighten around her like a noose woven from other people's lies. She had faced hostile boardrooms before, powerful investors, the kind of men who shook hands while sharpening knives behind their backs. But this was different. This wasn't business. This was the soul of a city cracking open. Her phone vibrated against the console. "Emily," Jordan answered softly. "You all right?" A shaky breath crackled through the line. I didn't know who else to call. "They're outside my apartment." Jordan straightened instantly. I don't know," Emily whispered. "Two men in a black SUV, just sitting. They've been there for an hour." Jordan felt her pulse drop into a lower, colder rhythm. "Did they approach you?" But one of them was on the phone. "I heard him say my name." Jordan's grip tightened around the steering wheel. "Stay inside. Lock your door." "I'm scared," Emily whispered. "I know," Jordan replied. "But you're not alone. I'm coming." She hung up and began driving before the engine had fully settled. The city blurred past grey buildings, wet pavement, ghost-like silhouettes, hurrying along sidewalks, unaware of the storm twisting beneath the surface. Jordan turned onto Emily's street, her eyes scanning every shadow. And there it was. A black SUV windows-tinted engine, idling like a wild animal waiting for a signal. Jordan parked 2 blocks away and approached from the side alley. Snow stuck in her hair, melting into cold rivulets down her neck. She didn't care. She moved like someone who had been pushed too far to allow fear a voice anymore. One man sat behind the wheel eyes, hidden behind dark glasses, even in the weak winter light. Another stood outside the vehicle, leaning against the passenger door, scrolling through his phone, glancing every few seconds at Emily's apartment window. Jordan stepped out of the alley and walked straight toward them. The standing man noticed her first. "Ma'am, you shouldn't be here." Jordan didn't break stride. "Then why are you here?" He stiffened, glancing quickly toward the driver. "Ma'am, you need to move along." Jordan's voice dropped to a low, dangerous calm. "You said her name." He froze. His shoulders squared. "I don't know what you..." Jordan stepped closer. "Say it again. Say you don't know Emily Carter." The man opened his mouth, then closed it. The driver's door opened. "Ma'am," the driver said, his tone firmer, rehorsed. "This is a private investigation, authorized by the city council." Jordan felt anger spike, bright and cold. "Show me the paperwork." The 2 men exchanged a glance. Jordan crossed her arms. "Didn't think so." The standing man lowered his voice. "We're just here to talk to her." "You talk to her," Jordan said, her voice steady as stone through law enforcement. "Not outside her home. Not like this. Not when she's already reported your presence." The driver stiffened. Reporter Jordan smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "You followed the wrong woman." Both men froze as Officer Graves walked around the corner badge, visible a second patrol car slowing behind her. "Gentlemen," she said, voice calm but iron-lined. "Unless you're here with a warrant or a city-issued directive, you're trespassing and intimidating a witness in an active investigation." The standing man swallowed. We're contractors. Pruitt's office asked us. "Stop talking," Graves said. "Hands where I can see them." They obeyed. She cuffed them both efficiently, ignoring their half-hearted protests. and signaled to the patrol car to take them in. Jordan watched silently as the men were loaded into the vehicle. She felt neither relief nor triumph, only confirmation, the kind that settled deep in the chest like a stone. Graves turned to her. "You really shouldn't make a habit of confronting people like that." "And let them scare her," Jordan shook her head. "Not happening." Graves sighed. "You may think you can stand between them and the truth, but these people have networks, history, money. They'll keep sending someone." Jordan looked toward Emily's window. A small face pulled the curtain aside, fragile and confused. "Then we make sure our network works faster." Emily opened the door before Jordan reached the steps. Her eyes were puffy, her voice thin. "Thank you." "I didn't know what to do." Jordan placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did exactly what you should have." Graves stepped closer. "Pack a bag. You're coming with me for protective housing until we sort out who sent those men." Emily's voice cracked. "Will it get worse?" Jordan answered before Graves could. "The truth always gets louder before it's heard." Emily nodded shakily and disappeared inside to gather her things. Graves leaned against the railing. "You understand this puts you deeper in the line of fire." Jordan met her eyes. "I was already in it." Graves studied her. "You're not law enforcement. You don't have protection. You don't have jurisdiction." "What I have," Jordan said quietly, "is evidence of generational corruption, a councilman who panicked at the sight of it, and a man who tried to retrieve it before the DOJ could. If they're this desperate to silence us, it means we're close." Graves didn't argue. She just looked at Jordan with a mixture of reluctant respect and concern. "Then we move carefully." Emily returned with a hastily packed bag and stood on the porch, fingers trembling. Jordan took the bag from her and handed it to Graves. "Take her somewhere safe, somewhere no one can walk up to the door." Graves nodded. "What about you?" Jordan looked down the street at the empty spot where the black SUV had been. Her breath curled into the cold air. "I'm going back to my office." Graves frowned. To do what Jordan's voice was a steady flame, to follow the trail they tried to bury. She walked back toward her car, snow crunching beneath her boots, her steps deliberate, each one heavier with resolve. The lockbox waited in the passenger seat, its presence like a heartbeat she couldn't ignore. When she slid into the driver's seat, she didn't start the engine right away. She looked at the pages again, at the signatures, the dates, the implications, and then she saw it, the faintest imprint of another name on the back of the last torn page, as though someone had pressed too hard while forging a signature decades ago. One name, one clue, one thread that might pull down an entire tapestry. Jordan whispered the name aloud, tasting the truth inside it. Then she started the engine. The city shuddered under the snowfall, and Jordan Walker drove straight toward the storm she knew was waiting for her. Jordan didn't notice the cold until she stepped out of her car again, hours later, the wind slicing across the rooftop parking deck like a blade dragged along concrete. The sun had dropped behind storm clouds, turning the sky into a dark smear of steel. 8 floors below the city pulsed with sirens traffic and the restless hum of a place carrying too many secrets for its size. She gripped the lockbox in one hand and the page she'd pulled from it in the other. The name at the bottom was faint, almost whispered into the paper rather than written. Dean Marlowe. A name she hadn't spoken in over 20 years. A name she believed had disappeared after a quiet scandal buried itself in city archives. A name that even then had felt like a door no one dared open. She stared at it under the harsh rooftop floodlight breath fogging in front of her. Dean Marlowe had been an advisor to the Land Renewal Bureau before it became the political engine it was now. Respected, connected, untouchable. And then one day, gone. No resignation. No obituary. Just vanished. Jordan folded the page carefully and slipped it back into the lockbox. The wind caught her coat and snapped it like a flag at half-mast. She turned toward the stairwell door, then froze. Someone else was on the roof. A silhouette leaned against the far wall, half hidden in shadow. Too still to be casual, too calm to be lost. Snow dusted his shoulders like ash on stone. Jordan's pulse tightened not with fear, but with calculation. "Long day?" the man asked. The voice was gravel, soft, unfamiliar. Jordan took a slow step forward, keeping the box tight against her side. "If you're here for the foundation," she said, "you're late." They already tried intimidation. He gave a dry laugh. "If I wanted to intimidate you, Miss Walker, I wouldn't start on a public rooftop." Jordan's jaw set. "Then say what you came to say." He stepped out of the shadow at last. Not a hired enforcer, not a frantic council staffer. Something older, something sharper. A man in his late 60s, tall, lean, with a face carved by decades of knowing exactly what other people feared most. His eyes were washed out, blue, almost grey, the colour of a storm that hadn't decided who it would break yet. "My name is Walter Kane," he said. Jordan inhaled sharply. Walter Kane had once been Dean Marlowe's protégé, and later the rumoured architect of the city's most quietly controversial zoning overhaul. He had vanished from the public eye just as completely as his mentor. Yet here he was. Jordan steadied her breath. "Why appear now? Because he said, stepping closer, you're digging in ground that was never meant to be disturbed." Jordan let the rooftop wind howl between them, swallowing the tension long enough for her to center her voice again. "You sound like someone afraid of what I'll find." Kane gave a slow, almost respectful smile. "No. Afraid of what you'll unbalance." He nodded toward the lockbox. "Those pages aren't evidence. They're landmines, and you don't know where they lead." Jordan resisted the urge to step back. "Then enlighten me." Kane's gaze shifted toward the railing, as though surveying the city below. Dean Marlowe didn't disappear. He was removed for trying to protect something in that ledger. Something older than zoning maps, older than land deals. You think it's about corruption, it's about power, the kind that's inherited quietly. Jordan's grip on the box tightened. Then why hide now? Why let the Pruitts take the blame? Kane's eyes snapped back to her. Because the Pruitts are pawns. They always were. Howard's father signed those documents because Marlowe told him to. And then someone made sure neither of them could ever undo that signature. Jordan felt a chill that didn't come from the cold. What happened to Marlowe Kane's jaw twitched. He tried to expose the truth. He thought the city was ready to face it. He was wrong. Jordan stepped closer, closing the gap. What truth Kane hesitated just long enough to confirm he'd been waiting decades for someone to ask. The city wasn't built on stolen land, he said quietly. It was built on the promise that no one would ever prove it. Jordan swallowed hard. The snow fell heavier, now wet flakes clinging to their coats. She could feel the next question pressing up her throat, sharp and dangerous. "So what do you want from me? I want you to stop." His voice cracked like ice beneath weight. "Before you reach a part of history that still has sharp teeth." Jordan shook her head once. "You think I'm afraid of a story someone buried 70 years ago?" Kane stepped toward her. his breath visible, his words colder than the wind. "I think you underestimate the people who kept it buried." Jordan felt something inside her settle into place, not with fear, but clarity. What happened yesterday? Howard panicking Blake, hovering over the archives, men sitting outside Emily's apartment. None of that was improvisation. Someone is coordinating this. Kane didn't deny it. Jordan squared her shoulders, Kane's eyes softened with something unexpectedly human. Regret, or admiration, twisted into warning. "Walk away, Miss Walker. If you keep pushing, you'll become part of the ledger instead of the one reading it." With that, he turned and walked toward the stairwell. Jordan's breath caught. "Kane." He paused. Why warn me he didn't face her when he answered? Because Dean tried to warn the last woman who asked the same questions. He opened the stairwell door. She didn't listen. The door shut behind him with a hollow thud. Jordan stood alone on the rooftop, the wind howling in the space he left behind the city, stretching beneath her like a map of choices no one wanted to revisit. The snowfall blurred the skyline into long streaks of grey and white, like the world was being erased at the edges. She looked down at the lockbox again. The metal lid felt heavier than it had an hour ago, as though the truth inside had grown. Dean Marlowe didn't disappear. He was removed. The city wasn't built on corruption. It was built on the agreement to never expose it. Someone else had been silenced for asking too much. Someone knew Jordan was next. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket, vibrating against her ribs like a second heartbeat. She answered without looking. "Jordan." It was Graves, her voice tight. "We have a situation." Jordan steadied her breathing. "What happened?" The DOJ brought Blake in for interrogation. He requested counsel. Then his lawyer arrived. Graves paused, and Jordan heard voices echoing behind her. "We ran his credentials. The attorney isn't registered in the state. We checked with the DOJ. They never sent him." Jordan felt the cold slice deeper, sharper. "Then who did?" Graves exhaled shakily. He walked Blake out of custody. No one stopped him. Cameras flickered at the exact moment they passed. And the car they left in, it's registered to a shell corporation tied to the defunct Renewal Bureau. Jordan felt her blood thrum with a cold certainty. Walter Kane was here. Graves froze. "How do you know that name?" Jordan stared out across the city. The snow felt heavier now, as though the sky pressed down on everything beneath it. "Because he warned me." Graves's voice dropped. "Jordan, what the hell are we walking into?" Jordan shut her eyes. Walter Kane's last words echoed through her skull. "You'll become part of the ledger instead of the one reading it." Her breath steadied a single sharp current. "We're walking into the truth," she said. "And they've been burying it for 70 years. Snow whipped across the rooftop. The city listened. The war for its history had finally begun. The wind battered the glass as Jordan stood inside her office, staring at the floor to ceiling windows without seeing anything beyond her own reflection. Dawn had not yet broken. The world outside was a dark blur of streetlights, smeared through fog. The silence was heavy, weighted with the warning Walter Kane had delivered, and the realization that Blake was no longer in custody. She set the lockbox on her desk, opened it, and spread the ledger fragments out once more. Every torn edge seemed to point toward a truth too jagged to touch. Footsteps approached down the hallway, slow, cautious, not the hurried stride of her employees arriving early. Jordan turned just as the door opened, and Officer Graves stepped inside, her face drawn, her coat still dusted with snow that hadn't melted. She shut the door quietly, as if the walls were listening. "You should consider leaving the city for a few days," Graves said. There was no preamble, no greeting. Her voice was rough with exhaustion. "Go somewhere they can't track you." Jordan arched a brow. "And what will that solve?" "It might buy you time," Graves replied. "Blake disappearing the way he did. Someone tampered with federal surveillance feeds. That's not a favor you call in unless you're protecting something enormous." Jordan picked up one of the pages and held it to the light. The ledger. The ledger, Graves confirmed, folding her arms. Or whatever it leads to. Jordan rubbed her thumb over a faded signature. They buried the truth once. They're trying to bury it again. They expect fear to do the rest. Graves sat opposite her, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles paled. Fear has kept this thing hidden for generations. "What makes you think you're immune?" Jordan met her eyes. "Because I'm not part of their history. I'm not beholden to their promises." Graves exhaled almost a laugh. "Most people fight small battles, Jordan. You're picking a war." The door burst open before Jordan could respond. Emily stumbled inside, hair damp with melting snow cheeks, flushed from running. She froze at the sight of Graves, then turned to Jordan with panic widening her eyes. "They broke into my apartment." Jordan swung forward in her chair. "Were you there?" "Number Graves's people moved me last night, but everything was torn apart. Files, books, even the floorboards." Emily's breath hitched. They were searching for something. Jordan stood. "The ledger fragments." Emily nodded, trembling. "They think I might have made copies or hidden something." Graves grimaced. "They're escalating. I'll send a unit to secure the building and talk to the neighbors." Emily shook her head fiercely. "You don't understand. They weren't looking for paper." She reached into her coat and pulled out a thin, leather-bound notebook. They were looking for this. Jordan took it gently. "What is it?" "My grandmother kept it," Emily said. "She wrote down stories about the old neighborhoods, the families who lived there before the renewals. I thought it was just sentimental." Her voice dropped. "But some names match the pages in that box. And then she wrote something else. Something about a fire." Jordan flipped through the notebook. The handwriting, looping and delicate, filled the pages with memories of porches and block parties and corner stores long gone. Then she reached an entry dated over 60 years earlier. Night of the fire. They said it was an accident, but I saw them. 3 men, one tall, wearing a grey coat. They went inside before the flames started. After that, no one spoke their names again. Jordan looked up sharply. "This fire. Where did it happen?" Emily swallowed hard. "On Dunwell Street, a street tied to the same land transfer on the ledger page. A street erased by redevelopment. A street that now housed the Heritage Renewal offices before they were dissolved." Jordan paced thoughts, firing with a clarity that frightened her. Kane said Marlowe tried to protect something. Maybe this was it. Maybe the fire wasn't about destruction. Maybe it was about covering the signatures that could expose the illegal transfers. Graves stiffened. Arson to bury evidence. Jordan nodded. And now someone wants to keep it buried. Just then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. A power hiccup that darkened the office for a heartbeat. Emily gasped. That's what happened when Blake left DOJ custody. The cameras flickered. Jordan stared at the darkened windows. The city lights outside blurred into streaks as more snow whipped past. Someone's tapping into the grid. Graves rose instantly. "We need to get out." But before she could finish, the office phone rang. Jordan stepped toward it, every instinct screaming caution. She lifted the receiver slowly. Walker. Static crackled on the other end. Then a voice, smooth, controlled, chillingly calm. Miss Walker, you've become quite the inconvenience. Jordan's spine locked. Kane! Graves moved closer, trying to catch the voice. Kane continued unhurried. You were warned, yet you've dragged a frightened young woman and a tired police officer into waters they cannot survive. Jordan's hand tightened around the receiver. You don't get to threaten them. I'm not threatening, Kane said. I'm predicting. People drown when they wade into history they don't belong to. Jordan's jaw clenched. Why cling to a lie this old? Because Kane said softly, truth isn't the opposite of power. It is the enemy of it. Static hissed. Walk away, Miss Walker. You don't know whose shadow you're standing in. The line went dead. Graves cursed under her breath. We need to trace that call. We won't find it, Jordan said. Her voice had changed, quieter, sharper. He planned this. Emily trembled. What do we do? They know about my grandmother's notebook. They know I'm with you. Jordan rested a hand on Emily's shoulder. Then you stay with Graves. She'll keep you safe. Graves didn't argue. And you, Jordan, picked up the lockbox and the notebook. The weight of both settled into the crook of her arm like armor. I'm going to find someone who still remembers the fire. Emily blinked. Who Jordan looked out at the swirling snow, the city half hidden beneath it. Someone who was supposed to die in it. Graves froze. You think there was a survivor? I think Jordan said, stepping toward the door, that the ledger wasn't the only thing they failed to burn. The wind howled outside, rattling the window frames. Jordan pulled up her collar, opened the door, and walked into the blizzard of truth, waiting to swallow her whole. Behind her, Emily whispered to Graves. Is she going to be all right? Graves watched Jordan's silhouette vanish down the hall. People like her don't stay all right, she murmured. They get stronger. But as Jordan stepped into the storm, the truth was simpler, colder, and heavier than courage. Strength wasn't the question. Survival was. Snow drifted sideways across the windshield as Jordan pulled onto the narrow road leading toward the outskirts of the old West Side, where the city lights dimmed and the houses grew smaller, older, quieter. The kind of neighborhood that remembered things even when people wished it wouldn't. She followed the address she'd found scribbled in the corner of Emily's grandmother's notebook, a tiny house on a dead-end street. Dunwell's last surviving structure after the fire that had rewritten the city's map. The houses around it were new, rebuilt decades ago, but this one slanted porch, peeling paint windows that sagged under time was a relic, a witness. She parked beneath a flickering street lamp, whose light stuttered like a tired heartbeat. Her boots crunched against the frozen ground as she approached the house. The air smelled faintly of chimney smoke, and something older, something like char, carried on winter air across too many years. She knocked once, twice. The sound echoed through the wood, sharp and hollow. A moment passed before the door creaked open. A man stood behind it, shoulders bent, but eyes sharp enough to slice through fog. His hair, white and wiry, framed a face, lined by time, but untouched by confusion. He studied her with the caution of someone who had spent a lifetime preparing for a knock that would eventually come. You must be the one asking about Dean, he said. No greeting, no hesitation, just truth. Jordan steadied her breath. You knew him. The man nodded once, opening the door wider. Name's Lionel Dunwell. Come in." The warmth inside washed over her, but it wasn't comforting. The room smelled of cedar and old books, the walls lined with framed photographs of people whose lives were small but vivid, captured before the West Side had changed forever. Jordan stepped across the threshold, and Lionel closed the door behind her, with a soft thud, as if sealing them inside the past. He motioned to a worn armchair opposite his own. "Sit. Tell me why you're stirring ghosts." Jordan placed the lockbox on the small coffee table between them, and opened the lid. The torn ledger pages glowed faintly under the lamplight, their yellowed paper turning memories into artifacts. Lionel's breath hitched when he saw them. His hands trembled, reaching out, but stopping before touching. "My father's handwriting," he whispered. Jordan nodded. "Your family was erased from the official records." Lionel's eyes clouded. "Burned from them." Jordan leaned forward. "Tell me what happened." Lionel sank into his chair, shoulders heavy under the weight of 7 decades. The fire wasn't an accident. Dean came to warn my father that signatures had been forged, land reassigned without consent. They were going to expose it together. But someone found out. His voice grew rough. The night the fire started, Dean shoved me out the back door and told me to run. I was 12, flames everywhere, screaming. Jordan felt her chest tighten. Your father Lionel closed his eyes. He didn't make it, and Dean disappeared the next morning. Folks said he fled, but I knew better. No one flees with smoke in their lungs. Jordan glanced at the ledger fragments. "Do you know who orchestrated it?" Lionel opened his eyes again, and there was steel in them now. Walter Kane. Not alone. But he was the spider in the center. He wanted the land for a development project that never made it to the public. Illegal money. Illegal transfers. He needed the Dunwell property to complete the circle. Jordan's pulse steadied with grim clarity. He told me Dean was removed. Lionel let out a bitter, hollow laugh. Removed is a polite word for what they did. A gust of wind slammed against the windows. Both turned toward the sound. Lionel's expression darkened. "They followed you here." Jordan stood instantly. "I made sure no one." He shook his head. "You don't outrun men who have been hiding the truth for 70 years. Before she could respond, headlights sliced across the curtains. A car engine idled outside. Then another. The crunch of boots stepped onto the walkway. Jordan moved to the window, lifting the edge of the curtain just enough to see 2 figures emerging from the shadows. Not police, not DOJ. Something colder. Hired silence. Lionel stood slowly retrieving something from a drawer, a small metal box covered in dust. "This belonged to Dean," he said, handing it to Jordan. Inside was a set of keys, brittle letters, and a folded map. "What is this?" she whispered. The address where Dean hid the rest of the ledger. Jordan's breath caught. "It still exists, it does," Lionel said. "He told me he kept the whole truth in one place. Said one day the city would need to reckon with it." He looked toward the door, his voice thinning. "Looks like that day is here." A heavy fist pounded against the front door. Jordan stepped back into the shadows, clutching the box and the ledger pages. Lionel stayed seated, expression calm but fierce in its resignation. "Mr. Dunwell," a voice called, smooth, confident. Kane's voice. "Open the door. We need to speak with Miss Walker." Lionel didn't answer. Jordan whispered, "There's a back exit." Lionel nodded. "Laundry room. Window leads to the alley." The pounding grew louder. Wood splintered. Jordan grabbed the lockbox, the map, the letters. She started toward the hall but paused. "Come with me." Lionel shook his head once. My part is finished. Yours isn't. Another slam echoed. The hinges screamed under pressure. Jordan hesitated. For the first time since this began, she felt something close to despair claw at the edges of her resolve. Lionel placed a steady, warm hand over hers. Tell the truth, he said, and make it louder than they can bury. Jordan nodded, throat tight, and slipped down the hallway as the door finally cracked open behind her. She heard Kane's voice spill inside, low and venomous, followed by Lionel's steady defiance. Jordan reached the laundry room, pushed the window open, and climbed into the freezing alley. Snow fell harder now, swallowing her footsteps, even as she ran. She didn't look back. Couldn't. The map burned in her pocket like a second heartbeat, guiding her toward the place Dean had hidden. The truth, the kind that could dismantle everything, the city thought it knew. By the time she reached her car, headlights tore down the alley behind her. Kane's men. She jumped inside, slammed the door shut, and drove into the storm with the tires skidding across ice adrenaline coursing through her veins. The lockbox rattled on the seat beside her. Dean's map spread out across the dashboard, illuminated by the dim glow of the overhead light. The truth wasn't safe anymore, but it was moving, breathing, alive in her hands. As the road disappeared beneath the white veil of snow, she whispered the promise Lionel had given her. Make it louder than they can bury. If this story has kept you on the edge with Jordan's fight for the truth, make sure to like the video, subscribe for the next chapter, and comment 3 words: protect the truth.